The storm hit with a ferocity that had not been forecasted. What was supposed to be a routine sailing trip turned into a fight for survival. John, an experienced sailor, found himself at the mercy of the relentless waves and howling winds. His small boat, the Sea Wanderer, was tossed around like a toy in a bathtub. The world became a blur of water and darkness, and John could barely keep his grip on the helm. Hours later, with the storm finally abating, John found himself stranded on an unfamiliar shore. The island was eerily silent, its dense forest looming ominously at the edge of the beach. Exhausted and disoriented, he stumbled ashore, grateful to be alive but wary of his surroundings. The Sea Wanderer was wrecked beyond repair, its hull shattered against the jagged rocks that lined the shore. As John gathered what little supplies had survived the wreck, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The island, which appeared uninhabited, seemed to pulse with an unseen life. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves. He decided to venture into the forest, hoping to find fresh water and perhaps some means of signaling for help. The forest was dense, with towering trees that seemed to block out the sun, casting long, menacing shadows on the forest floor. As John pushed deeper into the woods, the silence became almost deafening. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. After what felt like hours of trudging through the dense undergrowth, John stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old, decrepit cabin, its wooden walls covered in moss and vines. The cabin looked as if it hadn't been touched in decades, but it was the first sign of human presence John had seen. Hesitant but desperate, John approached the cabin. The door creaked open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit interior. The cabin was sparsely furnished with a rickety table and chair, a rusted stove, and a dusty bed in the corner. An old, tattered journal lay on the table, its pages yellowed with age. John picked up the journal and began to read. The entries were written in a hasty, almost frantic script. The journal belonged to a man named Thomas, who had been shipwrecked on the island years ago. Thomas wrote of his desperate attempts to escape, his growing paranoia, and the strange occurrences that plagued him. As John read further, he discovered that Thomas had become convinced that the island was cursed. He wrote of hearing whispers in the night, of seeing shadowy figures lurking in the trees. Thomas had tried to leave the island multiple times, but each attempt ended in failure. The journal's final entry was a scrawled, barely legible note. "The island won't let me go. I'm trapped." A chill ran down John's spine as he closed the journal. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. The shadows in the cabin seemed to move, and he could almost hear faint whispers carried on the wind. He decided to leave the cabin and find a safer place to spend the night. As night fell, John built a small fire on the beach and settled down, his back against a large rock. The fire provided some comfort, its crackling flames a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the island. But as the night wore on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. John's sleep was fitful and filled with nightmares. He dreamt of shadowy figures closing in on him, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. When he awoke, the fire had burned out, and the first light of dawn was creeping over the horizon. Determined to find a way off the island, John spent the next few days exploring every inch of the forest and the coastline. He found no signs of other inhabitants, no boats, and no means of communication. The island seemed to be playing tricks on him. He would often find himself back at the same clearing with the cabin, no matter which direction he started in. The journal's warnings echoed in his mind. "The island won't let me go." John tried to dismiss it as the ravings of a madman, but he couldn't ignore the strange occurrences. At night, the whispers grew louder, and the shadowy figures seemed to come closer. On the fifth night, John awoke to find the fire had been extinguished, though he had built it high before falling asleep. The shadows danced around him, and the whispers became a cacophony. In a panic, he grabbed a burning stick and waved it around, trying to ward off whatever was lurking in the darkness. Desperation and fear gnawed at him. John knew he couldn't survive much longer on the island without food and fresh water. His mind raced with plans of escape, but each attempt ended in failure. The island's geography seemed to change. Paths that he had followed during the day disappeared at night, and the oppressive silence weighed heavily on his sanity. As days turned into weeks, John's resolve began to crumble. The isolation, the whispers, and the unrelenting sense of being watched took their toll. He found himself drawn back to the cabin, unable to resist its pull. The journal became his only companion, its pages now filled with his own desperate scribbles. One fateful night, the whispers grew louder than ever. The shadows in the cabin seemed to coalesce into a dark, menacing figure. John felt a cold hand grip his shoulder, and he screamed. The figure whispered in his ear, its voice a chilling, echoing hiss. "You cannot leave. You belong to the island now." John's mind snapped. He ran out of the cabin, his screams echoing through the forest. The island seemed to come alive with a malevolent force, the trees twisting and turning, their branches clawing at him. He stumbled through the darkness, his breath coming in ragged gasps, until he collapsed on the beach, exhausted and defeated. When he awoke, the sun was rising, casting a golden light over the island. But John felt no relief. The island's curse had taken hold of him. The whispers were now a constant presence, and the shadows followed him wherever he went. He was trapped, just as Thomas had been, condemned to a life of isolation and madness. Years passed, and John became a ghost of his former self. His once strong frame became gaunt and frail, his mind a shattered wreck. The island's curse held him in its grip, a relentless, inescapable nightmare. He continued to write in the journal, his entries becoming more incoherent and desperate with each passing day. One day, a storm rolled in, similar to the one that had brought John to the island. As the storm raged, a small boat appeared on the horizon, tossed about by the waves. The boat was manned by a lone sailor, struggling to stay afloat. John watched from the beach, a twisted smile on his lips. The island had claimed another victim. The cycle would continue, the curse unbroken. The sailor would find the cabin, the journal, and the same whispers that had driven John to madness. The island remained silent, its malevolent presence hidden beneath its tranquil exterior. The cursed souls of those who had come before lingered, trapped in an eternal cycle of despair. The silent isle claimed all who set foot on its shores, binding them to its dark heart forever. John's story, like Thomas's, would become just another entry in the island's cursed history, a warning to those who dared to challenge its silent, haunting embrace.
Thank you for watching Midnight Knocks. If you enjoyed our horror stories, please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to check out our other videos for more eerie adventures. Until next time, stay spooky.